And good morning. I'm Brady Burrell coming to you live from the Emergency Operations Center here in Morgan City as the annual Hurricane Preparedness meeting is about to get underway. A large contingency of local officials, others representing the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals, the Red Cross, National Weather Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, the St. Mary Parish Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, the St. Mary Levee District, the congressional delegation. St. Mary Parish President David Hannegriff is expected to speak, as well as the executive director of the Port of Morgan City, Mac Wade. He is expected to open the event shortly. And also with us is David Nakan. He is the director of the St. Mary Parish Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. This happens every year right around this time, just a few weeks before we begin hurricane season. And it's a time for local officials, those who plan emergency preparedness, to come together and prepare and plan for any type of response that would be needed in the event of a hurricane threat here in the St. Mary Parish area. So we will get underway shortly. Again, my name is Brady Burrell, and we do thank you for joining us. We should be getting started at any moment now. And we'll pan over and let you see the crowd that has converged here. We are coming to you live from the Emergency Operations Center in Morgan City. Law enforcement, local officials, elected officials, you name it, they're all here, and stakeholders, and we will get underway shortly. They're just making sure everyone is here that should be here that will be speaking. There's the agenda, the lineup of speakers and topics, those who will be their agencies who are being represented here today. Once again, we want to thank you for joining us. We will begin shortly. And here we go, Cindy Catrera with the Port of Morgan City.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to our 11th annual Hurricane Preparedness meeting. I'm just going to recognize a few people. We still have people walking in, and if I miss anyone, I do apologize. I really would have to recognize the entire room, but we do have one of our commissioners here, Mr. Stephen Corns, our executive director, Mr. Mac Wade. We have, I'm going to recognize some police chiefs. We have Chief Adams from Morgan City Police Department, Buzzy Trahan from Chitimacha Tribe, David Leonard from Berwick PD, and Mr. Garrett Grogan from Patterson PD. We have Mr. Mark Patterson, who is the Customs Director for this area. Laura Meadows, who is with Senator Brett Alland's office. Welcome to our new superintendent for St. Mary Parish School Board, Ms. Buffy Fagenbush. And we have Mayors Duval Arthur, Rodney Grogan. We have from Franklin, Mr. Folgard. And I think that's all that I saw walk in. So if I missed anyone, I apologize, but we have to get on with the program. I did want to recognize also Mr. Greg Ellison, who is with Congressman Clay Higgins' office.
Clay sends his greetings, and he wants to tell you got $43 million to support the
And please express our thanks to him for that. I don't see Parish President Handgriff here yet, so we're going to go on with the program, and I'm going to call up St. Mary Office of Homeland Security to continue with the program. Thank you.
You ready, Doug? Yes, sir. Good. Thank y'all for coming. It's a good crowd. If y'all notice, we're a little bit not as crowded as we were last year, because last year, because of Kim and Ashley, we wound up having a pretty large meeting. In fact, we broke it into 2 sessions last year. Be a little bit different this year. We've got, we're going to actually record the entire meeting this year. We're going to try to. Y'all know how great I am with laptops and iPhones and all that stuff, you know. But we're going to try, and we're going to put it on our webpage in case anybody needs it. Everybody who's going to be presenting will have their all of their presentations on a flash drive. So if y'all see something you want to repeat, or if you want something for some group, organization, or whatever that you have within the parish, just call me or Jimmy, and we'll be glad to come out and give you a hand with that. Last year, we had Roger Erickson with the Weather Service. Well, he's moved up in the world. He's now this guy's boss, as a matter of fact. So, but we're glad to have him. Doug worked with us a lot last year. It's the first time we've had an opportunity to share some time with him. And the good news is him and Mike Bracata are going to have a little meeting when this is over with, so we can discuss levee elevations in our parish. So when they do their storm surge predictions, we might have a little bit better idea of what actually might happen. So without further ado, I'd like y'all to introduce Mr. Doug Kramer with the National Weather Service.
You guys want me to speak into this, or? Okay. This one right here? Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I'm really honored to be here. To be honest with you, I feel very insecure. I grew up in Kansas. And I know you guys know a heck of a lot more about hurricanes than I do. So, no, Doug Kramer, I came here back in early December, and as the warning coordination meteorologist in Lake Charles. And so I've been here about six months, and it's been quite a whirlwind. Very busy, a lot of tornado outbreaks, but now we got to prepare for hurricane season. And just got back from the National Hurricane Center for a week of training down there. It was really good. Learned a lot, and still have a lot to learn. So big shoes to fill with Roger. But I can promise you, you guys have my full energy and engagement once we get something into the Gulf. Make sure this is working here. There we go. All right. So, we're coming up on that time of year. We start to heat up, across the Atlantic Basin and the Gulf of Mexico. We typically get the most activity, in September and August, and we start to cool back down in October and November as far as tropical activity. September 11th is typically our peak months for any activity there. This is always an interesting graph here because you can see the Atlantic Basin, tropical cyclones, they can happen pretty much anywhere. That makes it more challenging for us. In the Pacific, it's more of a narrow corridor where they typically happen from a climatological standpoint. And those are tropical cyclone tracks all the way back from 1851 in the Atlantic Basin. So we've got a pretty good record of these things, going back pretty far. Last year, thank goodness, it was a pretty quiet season unless you're in Fort Myers, Florida. So they had a major hurricane hit that area. But for the most part, and across the Gulf of Mexico, it was a pretty quiet season. And we had a few cyclones and systems out there in the Atlantic that didn't really do a whole lot, have a whole lot of impact to people. The good news, heading into this year, we do have an El Nino watch that's been posted. Typically, under El Nino conditions, we have less tropical activity out across the Atlantic and the Gulf. So we have a 62% chance for El Nino developing by the end of July, and then that bumps up to about an 80% chance by the end of August. So we're pretty confident that we're going to be going into El Nino. We're neutral now, but we'll be transitioning into El Nino most likely. And across the Atlantic, during El Nino conditions, you can see that we do have fewer hurricanes. Pacific, you tend to see an uptick during El Nino. During La Nina, it's the opposite, where you've got less activity in the Pacific and more across the Atlantic and the Gulf. And under neutral conditions, if you go back and look at all the storms and what has happened since the late 1960s when we've been keeping track of the ENSO, we typically even have more. So we're in neutral now. We don't want to stay in neutral. We definitely want to transition to El Nino. We do have a little bit of a conflicting signal, though, heading into this year, and you'll see it in some of the forecasts that I'm going to show you here. Across the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, our sea surface temperatures are above normal at the moment. So whenever you have above normal sea surface temperatures, you would tend to have a little bit of an uptick in activity. So El Nino, above average sea surface temperatures, you got conflicting signals there going into the season. And just for historical purposes, when we talk about neutral years, we tend to have more hurricane activity. That's indeed the case. We have more than almost 3 times the amount of hurricanes during neutral ENSO conditions compared to El Nino, and then about twice as much during La Nina. So again, reinforcing the idea that we definitely want the El Nino to occur. La Nina hurricanes, these are the ones that impacted South Central Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, Southeast Texas only during La Nina seasons. It's so neutral, we've got more. But the one thing we can't forget about, we still can get activity during El Nino seasons. And we've certainly seen that. Hurricane Audrey, 1957, that was pretty bad for Cameron Parish. That was during the El Nino season. And then taking a look at all hurricanes through 1856 and their origins. They can start out there in the Atlantic. Most of them probably start in the Gulf when they affect us. So getting into the forecast, this is Colorado State. They put out a forecast every April. The statistics to the right, that's average activity. So named storms, on average we get 14.4. Hurricanes, we get on average 7.2. Major hurricanes, 3.2. That's just for the Atlantic, Gulf basins. Their forecast is right at average, maybe slightly under average. The Weather Channel, they also put out a forecast. They're pretty much right at average on all the categories there. The one that kind of gets my attention is the University of Arizona. They're going above average. They're going above average on named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes. And if you read their discussion, they're really hitting on the above average sea surface temperatures for that forecast. Storm surge, just got back from the Hurricane Center. They're really harping on 2 impacts. One is the storm surge. That continues to impact the most lives when it comes to hurricanes. We certainly saw that with Hurricane Ike. Even though Ike hit the Galveston Bay area, we had tremendous storm surge across southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana with that. And if you look real close on that image to the right, you can even see the saltwater burn along the coastline there of Louisiana. Hurricane Laura, we saw a record storm surge for Louisiana. This is about 17.1 feet above ground. If you know where South Cameron High School is, it was just east of there when Hurricane Laura came in. We thought that was going to be across Lake Charles, but the storm kind of turned to the east a little bit and impacted a less populated area. So storm surge can be pretty big. I certainly encourage you to take a look at the National Hurricane Center storm surge maps here. And I know for Morgan City, they've got this dashed area here, which is the levee system that's protecting the area. And they've got that all the way up to Category 5. If you're not in this storm surge at all, this is the worst that you get right here. So that's the maximum. Can't get any worse than that. The other thing that the Hurricane Center is really harping on, we're starting to see an uptick in freshwater fatalities. So whenever you get a situation like Hurricane Harvey, and you're getting 65 inches of rain near Beaumont, Texas, that's going to be a big problem. So you're flooding your rivers and your creeks, and that's coming down into your storm surge area. So don't forget about freshwater fatalities. One thing that's new this year, the tropical weather outlook. So this isn't the cone. This is the cone of uncertainty. This is when there's a disturbance out there in the Atlantic and the Gulf basins, and they're suspecting that it could potentially become a system a little bit more organized. That used to be 5 days, and now it's 7 days. So I can tell you from a briefing standpoint, if we get something like this, and that red shaded area is pointing into the Gulf of Mexico, that's when I'll start my briefings to emergency management directors. And again, that goes out through 7 days. Timing of arrival graphics, just a couple items that I'll be briefing. When we get something into the Gulf, the one on the left is the earliest reasonable arrival time. So that's if the storm were to speed up. Sometimes it happens. There's changes in tropical cyclone activity when it comes to movement, strength. It's always changing. And that's when I'll be telling the emergency management directors that you may want to have your preparations done by this time, just in case it speeds up. The one on the right is the most likely timing of arrival. These graphics are generated by the National Hurricane Center, and they're posted publicly. The shaded, probably should go over, the shaded area is just a probability of tropical storm force winds. That's what that is. The National Hurricane Center, if you take a look at the graphic to the right, one of their methods when it comes to forecasting speed and the track of a tropical cyclone is they're running a lot of ensembles. As a matter of fact, it's about 1,000 ensembles. So they've got roughly a dozen hurricane models, but from those models, they run a ton of other models from that. And it's based off of past air, things that they've noticed about tropical cyclones in the past, wobbles and things like that. So they run about 1,000 different models, and they basically draw up a forecast track right in the middle of all those ensembles. So these are all potential tracks, but if all these tracks are clustered really close together, not only does that give us confidence in the future of that cyclone, but also it gives us an idea about where to potentially draw up that forecast. Keep in mind, one thing that they really reiterate is the fact that wobbles cannot be forecasted. So you can get these wobbles and storms, and we still don't have a good handle of when that's going to happen or what direction that wobble is going to occur. The cone of uncertainty, that has not changed. It's still 5 days. So the tropical weather outlook has gone up to 7 days, but the cone of uncertainty hasn't changed. One thing to keep in mind, the way these are drawn out, 67% of the time, the center of that tropical cyclone is going to remain within that cone. So they draw up these 67 percentile circles around their forecast track. And then they basically connect the dots to draw up that cone. So technically 33% of the time, tropical cyclone, the center of that will move outside of that cone area. And keep in mind that impacts could occur away from the center and outside of that cone, especially the storm surge. The other thing to keep in mind, the forecasts continue to get better. The purple line there, that used to be the 2005 cone, so it's a lot wider. And you look at what's happened in 2020, it's become a little bit more narrow. So they do a really good job of keeping statistics on their forecast and taking a look at air and learning from that. And from that, they've been able to narrow down that cone. This is the last slide. This is probably the most important, especially for the emergency management community. So the way this works is the National Hurricane Center, they put out 4 forecasts every day. So there's 4 cycles. This is just one cycle that occurs in the morning. I wanted to give you an example of the cycle. The hurricane forecaster, they'll go in, they'll begin their analysis at about 7 o'clock in the morning. They're taking a look at microwave satellite imagery. They're taking a look at seafoam. Seafoam gives them an idea about how intense the wind speeds are, max winds. And they're looking at the past 6 hours. So they're placing a Latin lawn over the center of that cyclone over the last 6 hours. They run their forecast models. By about 9 o'clock in the morning, they've got a forecast track that is internally finalized. At 9:15, that's when they're collaborating with the field offices. So we get something in the Gulf, to point into Southeast Texas, Louisiana, that's when they're talking to us in Lake Charles. At about 10 o'clock, that cone of uncertainty, the timing, and the probability products are all issued. At 10:15, that's when I'll be briefing the emergency management directors. That also includes the state level emergency management. I've had, especially in Southeast Texas, I've had some emergency management directors that's been very adamant that they want that meeting very tight. They don't want media in there, they don't want other partner groups in there. Elected officials and emergency management directors, basically, will be in that meeting. They need to feel free to be able to talk about tactical decisions such as evacuations and things like that without rumors getting out and stuff going on. So that'll be a pretty tight meeting, briefing at 10:15. At 10:45, all other partner groups will be briefed at that point. So that's the way that's going to work out. And that's all I have. I can take any questions that you may have.
Will Donald Jones still be there at your place to get video?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, if he's there, he'll be doing a Facebook Live at 10:30.
Because of the lapse in times of meetings and stuff, he gets in between and helps out with the information.
Right. So, and if he's not there, there'll be some other. We've got some other. We're starting to get it pretty staffed up, and we've got some other guys that can also do the Facebook Lives if the staffing is available. But this is what we can guarantee you. And then keep in mind, this will happen 4 times a day, especially if we get something that's threatening, it's close. I'll be up at 4:15 in the morning and 4:45 briefing our partners on this stuff. So 4 cycles a day. If it's not threatening and still far out there, we may only be doing it once or twice. So. All right, well, thanks for having me.
I think we have Mr. Tim Osborne coming up. And we pull his slides up, sorry. Okay. Tim's been coming to these meetings forever. He's part of the establishment over here. All right. There's your clicker.
Thanks, man. I'd like to thank, I'd like to thank that so many being represented today. This is one of the best hurricane preparedness meetings that we probably see across the entire coast of Louisiana, bar none, absolutely bar none. When you look at congressional, you look at city, you look at state, you look at federal participation, as well as the port and waterway community. This really is a crossroads. A couple things I'd like to bring up about this with the National Weather Service, like Charles, is the fact that they're probably one of the most experienced, not that that's necessarily a good thing, but it is certainly one of the most experienced and one of the most interactive type of weather forecast office you could really hope for. I mean, Roger has been there forever. They've seen evacuation of their weather forecast offices during Hurricane Laura, and yet they continue to function with the other weather WFOs helping out. A couple things about this in terms of preparedness.
Is your mic working? Because they're not hearing you well.
Any better? Okay.
Much better, thank you.
All right. I'd like to bring up the issue of preparedness, and that's the coordination with the National Weather Service. Doug may be new, but he's not new to the weather forecast offices and the Weather Service. And one of the things that's really important is to engage with him, to get him back to more meetings, of flood protection authorities, you name it, in terms of the criticality of what matters in terms of forecasting. That's the entire thing, is helping dial that in. The other thing to do is to continue to represent and look at your source of information and how you're using it, and that's one of the most important things. As he just talked about, the center lines of those storms are good for about 2/3 of the storms. How many remember Hurricane Sally? Hurricane Sally was a few years ago. That went on a chase all the way from coastal Louisiana to eventually making landfall. It's going to devastate Mobile Bay. And then in the last hours of the landfall process, it jumped over and made landfall over around Orange Beach, Pensacola, and caused havoc over there. So watching and looking and responding to every day's forecast and discussion by Doug and the Weather Service is important, because yesterday is old news. Something else is going to happen tomorrow, and that's really one of the most important things. The other important things is about, I want to point out about Arizona, Colorado, and everything. That's just great, good prognostication, but it doesn't reflect the reality we're going to go through. I don't know if you remember last year, but Slidell Weather Forecast Office was going ballistic because there was this urban myth that somehow a big hurricane had developed in the Gulf of Mexico and we weren't telling anyone about it. We're about to get hit by a hurricane in 3 days. Lauren Nash and Ben Schott at the Weather Forecast New Orleans office went nuts, basically saying, do you think we wouldn't tell you about a hurricane? And that was just one of those things. We also had, do you remember the Louisiana Hurricane Center? Remember the Louisiana Hurricane Center that was prognosticating and giving all these tracks and all these forecasts about these inbound hurricanes, and they were just nuts. Finally, they tracked it down to some kid in California in his mom's basement that was just making up the Louisiana Hurricane Center. So in a lot of ways, the authoritative source, knowing and seeing Doug or Roger, and knowing and looking at where they're going to be talking and what update the timelines are going to be making and everything are really important. This is a big rant in support of the Weather Forecast Office, but it also goes back to the things that we've experienced in having enormous amounts of information coming in from every corner that you could see saying this is what's going to happen, but don't listen to the National Hurricane Center. That's where people get hurt, and that's really the most important thing. So you and us as responders are responding to what we're getting as information from the National Weather Service, which is feeding it in from the National Hurricane Center and customizing to the local conditions and environment. That's the job we have. And if I could just figure out how to make this work. All right, tell me now. Or hit next.
Let's see.
You got a nice bridge.
I would just say that.
Next. That'll work. There we go. So this is us. This is us here. looking at all this and trying to really then deal with the issue of what do we do. Making it very, very simple is really the most important thing, and I think that's really the issue. One of the things that Doug mentioned about being very close door, indoors, on some of these discussions about what we're going to do with an inbound storm, really it's because as mayors and parish leaders, you're the ones that have to make the decision about evacuations. NOAA has no authority. Actually, the state, like the governor's level, if I correct me wrong, he really doesn't have the authority. It's going to be local leaderships like you. So those kind of discussions are very, very important. We respect that because it's so key. Port Fourchon leaves, but only after the parish leadership issues the evacuation order. That's when they shut down the ports. So in a lot of ways, this hand-in-glove type of response is so important. When do we start getting coastal populations and coastal workforce? There's 5,000 people in Fourchon right now, right there in the Gulf of Mexico. And if they got 1 2-lane highway and they got to get out of there, and then there's Grand Isle. So the whole thing is really an incredible timing act in terms of safeguarding and getting people out. Earl knows this and so many others, and that's why it's so important. Next, please. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about is storm imagery. So with the immediate aftermath of the storm, we will go ahead and start flying imagery. This is the important thing for all of us, and I'll get to another part that's really key as well. Access, as Doug talked about, access when you get a 62-inch rainfall event in South Houston, Southeast Texas, and I was there firsthand in the rain. Access is very, very key, and it's very, very limiting, but you have a real desperate need to know what my conditions are at my different infrastructure ports. We will start immediately flying aerial imagery after the storm passes and we get clear skies. Next, please. And we start laying out flight lines, transportation corridors, search and rescue, oil hazard material response. This year we're also going to be laying in Entergy power lines. Why? Because big power corridors turned out to be very susceptible to severe storms. We saw that with Florida Delta. We saw that with Ida. We had a power line and tower go down in the Mississippi River just in the New Orleans area. And if you can't get power with the energy corridor down to Port Fourchon and to the Loop, Louisiana Offshore Oil Port, you're not moving that 1 million barrels of crude oil refined products per day until you get those lines up and you still repower. So we're going to be adding utility power corridors as well. All of these are not to say that we've all preset. In fact, in a lot of ways, I want to point out to you that you, through FEMA or through contact with myself and NOAA, can actually add flight lines. Did we miss something? Is there a refinery that is a special problem? Things like that. Coast Guard actually can be a pipeline through the ICC system as well to add more imagery that we will pick up the next day in the next queue of flight lines. Next, please. To do so is to create an entire timeline and series of imagery that you can go back and you can look at every one of these things all the way back to Katrina in terms of documentation. Next, please. And in a lot of ways, as we're creating, even from Ida and Ian of last year, we're actually making the imagery even better. Better resolution, fewer flight panels, so you don't have to go sorting through so many, and also additional capabilities like here, you see Fourchon with one of the seaports, of creating a better thing where you can actually type in your home address, or just you can type in an infrastructure address. You can type in your home address, it'll actually take that imagery and go right to your home. So a lot of this gives you the opportunity to start, even before you can get your workforce back into that, to understand what kind of damage, what kind of impact you're seeing. A lot of times you're not going to see a whole lot. Perfect. As soon as I get roadway, sheriffs opening up the facilities that I can access it to, then I know what I need to do. If I look at real damage, like here and such as that, you know you're going to be shut down for a while, and then you can do alternative planning about who's going to be going in, who's going to be restoring things. One of the big ones we had with Hurricane Michael in 2018 was Chevron had a 93% of all gas that Florida consumes today, about 28 million gallons, comes in by ship or barge. So Hurricane Michael takes out a big barge terminal that offloads for Chevron into Panama City. That's 4 million people that depend upon that one terminal. And the imagery that showed was freight electrical, the loading terminals, the tanks were shredded, the whole bit. So immediately Chevron then goes on contract with other companies and other suppliers and other fuel terminals like Niceville, Jacksonville, places like that, Pensacola with a big Chico terminal. And they actually ran in extra fuel that was then loaded to trucks to be brought in, even before the Euro gained access to the actual facility themselves. So this is the kind of thing that's really important as well. Next, please. This is the aircraft. Nothing fancy, just very crowded, very hot, but with the processing, the photogrammetry actually done on the plane. So when they carry the hard drives off, they go on to an internet upload site, and the next day, or within a few hours, you're able to access it. Next, please. You can go ahead and next, please. This is slides that you can look at, but I'll talk to you later about some of these things if you have real questions. But the imagery acquisition is really the things that we work with FEMA, we work with Coast Guard, we work with Corps of Engineers, and the state government themselves. So if you're looking for things that we can find that you need to have acquired, we'll go ahead and do it. Can it be easy to download? Yes, it is. Can you see it on your web site, on your computer? Yes, you can. Can you go on your iPhone or your Android and look at those imageries? Yes, you can. Why? Because we know you're displaced. You're not sitting in an office. You may be somewhere else in an alternative site. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you. Next, please. So with the weather and other things, we will constantly update you whether we can acquire. Every day we fly this imagery, we will actually give you an update. Did we get everything we wanted? We didn't. We got cloud. We'll tell you what flight lines we're going to have and then what areas we're covering. Next, please. In a lot of ways, if you look at what we've done across coastal Louisiana, and then you look at Ian, it was the same thing. The problem with Ian, what happened when a Category 4 made landfall in South Florida? Who did it hit? It hit a highly populated Florida community, population. What experience did those people have to hurricanes? Almost none. Almost none. I won't point fingers, but I mean, you actually had county officials saying, oh, we weren't in the zone, we weren't in the cone, we weren't in the cone. We're in a lot of ways, if you look at a lot of our emergency managers in Louisiana, what are they telling you? We may not be in the cone today, we may be tomorrow, so we need to be prepared. And that's the difference between populations like us that have been through this and know the importance of warning and preparedness and response, as opposed to other populations where officials haven't had that experience. Worst loss of life we've had since Sandy. Largest damage to the state of Florida of any hurricane, over $70 billion. And Nicole came in and hit them over here. In fact, I actually have a cousin who owns a condo in a big 18-story tower. Took the entire sand and beach out underneath the thing. They came within that close of having it come down because it wasn't livable. So these kind of events are not a Louisiana event. They're an entire Gulf-wide event. Yeah.
Knowing that the leadership lacks any experience, what has the national government done to have consultants when a hurricane is coming in too?
Oh, we embed. I mean, the one thing, it's funny because I've been there many times with Irma and other things. Florida has a great state emergency operations center in Tallahassee, Florida. This thing is massive. And we embed, and there's even a Tallahassee National Weather Forecast Office right there. In the
So are you whispering in the ear of local county officials telling them this is...
The problem we really have is just what he and all of us are going to do. We're going to be on he's going to be on the phone with those county officials, with parish officials, every day, 2 or 3 times a day. The problem is, are they going to listen? Will they listen? And that is something we need to talk about more. And I think, and congratulations on the funding for Port of Morgan City. I'd be remiss not to say that. But that's really one of the most important things. This is for the state of Florida, where they actually, and you've been to NAC for training, right? Wendell Puroff's been there. Did you go to NAC yet? Okay, good. Dropped you. Well, they actually openly have week-long training for emergency managers at the National Hurricane Center year-round. So in a lot of ways, those are the kind of things that are really, really important. And the other thing, too, is are those county emergency managers really engaging with the weather forecast offices, like Ruskin, which was where I was in WFO dealing with Ian. How many people have been to a weather forecast office? If you haven't, call, go see it. Hey, you know, for fun, they even launch balloons twice a day, so you can go see one of those. And in fact, actually, we were just engaging with Terrible and Parish, Mr. Tim Allen with Apache, because one of the weather balloons came down on his property. He wanted to know who he could charge to retrieve the thing, and I kept saying, well, if it's federal property falling on your land, it must be our land, huh? So we just called it a truce right at that. But the thing really comes down to meet with them. I'm going long, but let me just kind of bring how this is so important to work together, because this was an example of why this coordination is so important and has seen the test of time in some of the most severe hurricanes, and look at where we are today in terms of our preparedness. Next, please. Summary. We take tons of imagery, we post it online, we have a pipeline that you can directly feed to us about needs for other imagery, and all of this can be done without you ever going to the site to make real operational decisions on how you're going to recover the terminal. Next, please. The other thing I want to bring up is one of the things to watch during the storm itself. This is the Coastal Inundation Panel, or Inundation Dashboard. So what the Weather Forecast Center is doing is looking at the track, the timing, and the cones coming to the coast. What we do is we don't do anything special, but what we do is we create one website with every one of these stations, tide and water level coastal stations along the coast, that you can watch in real time as this comes to the shore. And this is really important for the fact that it also gives you the opportunity to say, if I know, as Mike does, what my elevations of my flood protection levees, and I look at what my Berwick station or my mobile Atchafalaya base stations are in terms of storm surge, and it's coming up short of what my levee heights are, I'm not bad. I can actually do well. And so in a lot of ways, this Coastal Inundation Panel then gives you the opportunity to see what kind of a water level event you're going to have. How many were here for Hurricane Ike? Hurricane Ike, Cat 2, never deviated from a line right to Gulf. Flooded every coastal parish and the North Shore of Louisiana. Bringing back to the point that Doug made. Even if you're outside the cone, you can still see huge damage. And that's why the importance of flood protection, levee districts, and other things to be tied in so closely. Next slide. This is, again, what the dashboard is doing is it takes, and what we do is we take the Weather Service and the Hurricane Center track forecast. We plot it on every update that goes on to the Coastal Inundation Panel, and then we show you what tide and water level stations are seeing above normal water level increases, storm surge. Again, for you. So what does this mean for you in terms of using this? Know your elevations. What's the elevations of my docks? What's the elevations of my roadways? What's the number one? I won't pick on St. Mary. Let's pick on Lafourche, and because Earl's here in Terrebonne. So we're going to go once over. What is the Achilles heel for South Lafourche Parish? LA1. LA1, ground base. How high are they? 2 feet max. So even a minimal tropical storm, even at a distance, is going to shut off access to Grand Isle and to Port Fourchon well in advance of landfall of that storm. So that's why this panel is so important. Next, please.
Tim, check your mic.
Again?
I think it's off.
I think you hit it on. Hold it down.
Hold
Hold the power on the top.
on the top. Better?
No, you gotta hold it down so you see the green light.
All right. My lounge lizard, my karaoke is really bad.
Stay away from the power button.
All right, stay away from
Because it'll mute you is what it does if you press it.
Tori knows me well. Stay away from the power button.
And keep them on.
Okay, so this is better. All right, then after this, what's the one thing after a storm that you've got to prove to FEMA? That you even had a storm. That you even had a storm. We actually create and document, and the Weather Service does a very, very detailed storm surge, post-storm analysis report that's posted on the National Hurricane website. But we do a peak water level map and documentation for you as well immediately after the storm to help support you in terms of understanding and documenting and reporting out to you, to anyone, insurers, you name it, what kind of water level, peak water levels did I see with that storm event itself. So this is all documentation, all data for you to have after the storm to show the true impacts of what's out there. Next, by the way, with Ian, where was the storm surge? Go back a minute. Storm surge. Where does the storm surge with Ian? Right there. But where was the other storm surge for Ian? Up there. Northeast Florida, Jacksonville. Rotation of the storm itself. Again, everyone was looking at Fort Myers Beach, Naples, everything like that, and then not realizing how much damage was going to be. What was another example of a storm surge event just like that? Hurricane Irma. Hit Florida's Keys as a Cat 5. Came in, was going to go to Tampa Bay, duck hooked into the same general area, and this most severe flooding was on the northeast Florida side. So the important thing of listening to the weather forecast offices, and also looking at these inundation graphics and those stations as you see water levels going up can really be very, very helpful to have populations understanding, hey, it's making landfall in Fort Myers, but I've got a big storm surge problem right here in St. Johns River in Jacksonville. And those are the kind of things that are important. I'd like to point out Hurricane Isaac. Remember that? About 2012 time frame? Hurricane Isaac, barely a Category 1 hurricane for 8 hours, maybe? 10-foot storm surge went up the Mississippi River into downtown. It still stayed in the river, but it was downtown New Orleans, a 10-foot storm surge. Shell Beach, St. Bernard Parish, a 12-foot storm surge. So the intensity of the storm and the storm surge itself oftentimes have no relations in terms of how much water that can move. Why did Isaac call that much? Laplace, remember how it went underwater? Because Isaac wouldn't leave. It just stayed there and kept pumping and pumping and pumping water. Next, please.
Tim,
Yeah.
keep that mic up.
All
Or it's off again, you must have.
I hate this mic. Okay, next. This is us. This is the thing that I'll leave with you. I cover from Lake Charles, Sabine Pass, Cameron Parish, all the way over to Panama City, Florida. You're the center, right in the most important. You truly are the crossroads. You've got a top 10 port of Lake Charles just to the west of you. You've got the world's largest port complex to the east of you. And you've got Port Fourchon supporting 90% of every offshore platform, producing 20% of the energy we produce every day. And being the crossroads, you're responsible for tens of millions of tons of cargo coming across the GIWW every day that's supplying Florida, that's supplying Alabama, that's supplying all the chemical plants and refineries all over the place. So you truly are very, very special and very important in so many aspects. Next, please. This is Ian. This is us coming down to Ian. The same people John Kidd says to say hello. He's actually going to be bumped up to the head of the Navigation Response Group, overseeing all the NRTs. But the same NRTs you see here for Ian, they were here for Hurricane Ida. They were also here for Hurricane Laura. They were here for Hurricane Delta. This is what it looked like in the Fort Myers Beach area. It was a trash pile. It was an absolute trash pile. Why? Because they did not prepare. They left things at the dock, no moorings special to the storm, nothing. They literally left went back up to the condos and watched the whole place just disintegrate. And that is really one of the most important things out there. We had so much debris, we actually had to bring in an autonomous vessel, a little drone survey boat, because they were knocking into things so much that we were actually worried about actually damaging our own our manned survey boat. Next, please. This is the kind of lines that we surveyed for Tampa Bay and Fort Myers. This is exactly what we did for HNC. This is exactly what we did for Port Fourchon. It's exactly what we did for Hurricane Delta and Laura over in Calhoun-Cameron Parish. We had motor problems here that MAC was very good with Henkel Power and others to help us clean up. Fortunately, we didn't have enough time and the damage wasn't significant for the St. Mary Parish area for Ida that we could basically just send our crews without the boat to join with the other boats down at Fourchon Agency. We had offshore boats as well. Next, please. So when we actually deploy, and this is really one of the things, this is kind of the imagery we create. When we deploy, we do not do this on our own. We do this in consultation with the Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard captains of the port. And that's really important because there are so many waterways. We could never have enough assets to do it ourselves. Corps of Engineers, same way. We have different sonars, we do multi-beam, so when we're going in to look for sunken vessels like a sunken rock barge off of Calcasieu Pass in offshore of Lake Charles after Hurricane Delta, we're actually imaging it very effectively and reporting it within minutes. Next. And in so doing, we create these statistics. Next. And we also, if we're in an offshore conditions like outside of HNC or outside of Calcasieu Pass or outside of Port Fourchon, we can actually bring in, there's an 82-foot survey boat that's based and under contract to us in Stennis and Gulfport. The Thomas Jefferson was here for Hurricane Delta, and we can actually work offshore bar and ship channels out there that a normal small boat can't do for us. This all comes back to the coordination. If the Port of Morgan City sees a serious issue and discusses it with the Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard, then it can be put into our queue and actually go out and do that. This is all kind of a long way of saying that we're here for you. There are many tools and techniques, a lot of imagery to help you, but it all starts with centering your attention on the upcoming forecasts that the National Weather Service weather forecast offices are going to start. When that trigger gets pulled by them, then this whole process then starts working across many, many levels of government with you and all the ports. Next, please. And that's it. So thank you very much for hitting next. Thank you for getting the mic to go, and it went off again. I think
It did. I'm just going to have to swap it out.
We're going to swap it out. Any questions? Any questions? What is Earl still doing here? The man is...
He's buying lunch. He's buying lunch today.
So the question is there's an inside joke. David or Earl has the better forecast of the hurricane season, how many storms? I'd like to say that by the end of this hurricane season, we have a great reckoning that Matt can post is who's the winner, either the Terrebonne Parish guy or the St. Mary Parish guy. But I'd like to also point out to each and every one of you is that you have an incredibly important role, certainly as local leadership, and the more and more that we can help support you, the better it is for serving this entire community. He brought up a point, and Florida had it in, living in right across the entire sky. Did local leadership really know what we were telling them? Did they know the timing? And did they know the real threats and communicate it to a population that was not used to hurricanes? I mean, really. And on top of that, look at the average age. South Florida. These were a very vulnerable population that needed you all to really help them understand what they needed to do and the time they needed to do it in. Thank you very much.
Tim, you'll still have a bunch of people that won't leave.
Yes.
What can we do?
I think, all right, so I think the most important thing to do is lay it out very clearly, lay it out very succinctly, and try to offer them options. Offer them options. What can be done? I mean, Cameron Parish, it's amazing. People still were in Cameron Parish for Laura and Delta. The issue really is that you make it clear. This is what's going to happen. You could get killed. This is the alternatives you might have. Who can you talk to? I've never seen another parish not try to offer some way to say, look, if you can do this, if you can get over here, if you can be here, what needs to be done? And I think the other thing too, and I have been, and I know I know the problems you face. How many people have been in emergency command centers when that call comes in and there's a mom and 3 kids in the car and they don't know where to go? Should I stay? Should I go? Where do I go? How long will that take? Do I have the gas? I have talked more people off the road into shelters, or I have talked more people out of their homes. I had a sister-in-law, literally in straight line to the Hurricane Michael landfall in Panama City. She wouldn't leave. She would not leave until the last minute. Well, I suppose if you're saying it's serious enough, we'll go. The whole neighborhood was decimated. They would have been killed. 70-year-olds. They were worried about the cats. You know, I'm not a cat person, but I was, lock the cats in the bathroom and head out. And they finally did.
I'm a cat person, watch it.
You're a cat person? Okay, so, anyway, so I was nice about the cats. I said to lock them in the basement. But it's a problem that we all face with our families and all friends and the people that have. I had Earl remembers a meeting that I had an elderly woman come to me and said, I might, if it's a cat 2, I'll just stay in Terrebonne Parish. I'll stay in my home in Houma. But if it goes to a cat 3, I guess I'll leave. Hurricane Michael ramped up to a cat 5 in less than 24 hours. So those are the kind of things that are so important. I'll get out of your way. Thank you very much. And as always, you're great partners.
I can tell you one thing Earl taught me. We let you in the parish for free, but we charge you to go home. Exit tax. Okay. I'm going to try not to hit the button. Some of these slides are going to be duplication, but we're going to go through them pretty quick. So appreciate y'all coming. Appreciate Jack and Cindy and Tori and everybody for hosting this farce again. This is a great place. We'll be in here during the event for the most part. Just depends on where it's going to land and where you think will be most effective. So, but anyway, we're going to be on top of it for the, whoops. So, that was last year. Some idiot said we wasn't going to have one in Louisiana, and it looks like he was right, whoever that guy was. For a declaration of emergency, like Tom was saying, the parish president to declare an emergency, any mayor, the tribal chief, of course the governor makes the declaration, hopefully gets back up to the president of the United States, and the one we really got to have every year is the president declaring a national state of emergency. That's when the majority of our reimbursement money kicks in. We don't get that. So just keep that in mind. So. But that's the pecking order, basically, for how things are going to go. Like I said, we'll have our meetings in here. We try to put out the information as fast as we can. Brady's here today with his YouTube streaming it. We're recreating a web page right now, and we're going to have everything on the web page. We'll try to put it on the web page, and the main thing on the web page will be the links to the Weather Service, to NOAA, Storm Prediction Center, any link we can give you. And let me tell you, folks, the reason we do that is you can read it just like I can read it. And that's basically how good they've gotten. They have gotten very good at doing predictions now. He had the cone, how small the cone has shrunk a little bit over the years. It is absolutely correct. They do a lot better job of predicting than they've ever done before. And of course, we'll send out emails to everybody. If you're not on our list, call the office, get with Janet. Janet will put you on our email list, and everybody will get the same email. What we try to tell everybody, you know, the last couple of hurricanes, the major cause of most of the deaths was generator exhaust systems. In the living room, running the generator. I mean, at some point, you know, I don't know, but I'm just telling you the facts. That's all I'm telling you is what's going on with that. And of course, what we're concerned about here on the coast is the high water levels, the storm surge predictions. We rely on Mike very heavily on giving us the English version of what they put out. They're gonna say all these big long terms. Sometimes they do a lot better than they've done, but at the end of the day, we need somebody to help interpret that. And Mike and Tim Mott and them do a great job helping us try to get an idea of what to expect. It's important that whether you're at your house, your business, schools, that you take as much time as you can to document what you've done prior to the storm. We have found that, you know, FEMA will come back 6 months later and say, hey, by the way, you didn't take a photograph of that, or, you know. And there's always going to be looking for reasons not to pay you, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. So you try to do as much as you can free with pictures, documentation, invoices, and then what we found on a lot of the generators is, you know, they got people have generators and they got a fuel tank, but they don't have a maintenance man at midnight when the generator goes out. So you got to think about all of that down the line, that you have something in line all the time in the event you have a loss of power or whatever. And of course, the call-out list for all your departments obviously is really, really important as well. That's back on our storm surge predictions. That's going to be a lot of what we depend on Mike for. And of course, we get those straight every day. When he was talking about all of those little spots on when Tom was talking about all those little spots on the coast, this is kind of one of the, I can't remember, it was Hurricane Delta. You see how fast things will go from 11 p.m. it was at 6. At 7 o'clock the next morning, it had dropped almost 1.5 feet. We check that pretty much every hour when we're at the office and we have power. This last storm, we learned a lot about the Starlink system, which we're going to have now, I can tell you, because without Starlink, we'd have been in trouble. We wouldn't have been able to talk to Earl last couple of years because of that. But we got through it. And by the way, this year, all the hospitals have a ham radio. 911 center has a ham radio, or fixing to be. You're going to get it. You're going to get it. And that's going to be kind of our backup system. What happened now? Well, that's his fault. What you did? You jinxed it. Just stay. Anyway, and you can see that's how we track that every year, because we like to know where the water's going, right? Because that's one of our main things. This little fellow lives at Sycamore Point. He has logged every hurricane that's had an impact at Sycamore Point, and does a real good job. When he says we have a 8-foot tidal surge, we know exactly how much the water went up at Sycamore Point. And we've used that post-storm to go take elevation shots at these locations just to see. So, but that he does that on his own, and he is, as you can see, Rita's way up at the top. Rita was actually worse than Laura, and that was the one right after Katrina. GetAGamePlan.org. It'll give you all the. It's like a little checklist. You can get it all done. We got some interesting things coming up this year. If we have to do an evacuation, And I think as the last few years have taught us is, it comes in as a Cat 1, and then right before it makes landfall, it might pop up 1 or 2 notches, which really makes it a lot worse. And it might get us in a situation where if we'd have known that it was coming, we might have evacuated sooner or called for the evacuation. But after a certain point, it's almost impossible to try to call an evacuation when it's too late. So, but that getagamePlan.org, and if you pick up some of our catalogs over here, you'll see that as well in it. This is going to be our problem this year. The hurricane evacuation route that we use obviously is 90. But I'm going to tell you who else uses it. Terrebonne, Lafourche, Plaquemine, St. Bernard, Orleans, everybody to our east uses Highway 90. And this year we're going to have a little bit of an issue because we got a DOTD rep here today who's we've been working real closely with. Highway 90 in New Iberia is one lane, one direction. So it's going to be very obvious this year that there's going to be some early calls for evacuation as opposed to years in the past. I know that, I want to say it was even Andrew, back in Andrew's days, we had people sitting in line for 3 and 4 hours, wind up turning around, going back to their house because they didn't want to get caught. So we've had, again, conversation. We got a big meeting coming up next week in Lafayette, which is the key to our evacuation is that the Evangeline Thruway work the red lights to allow people to go as opposed to letting them cycle on their own. Now, we were promised every year that's what they'll do. They ain't done it yet. They're getting a little better, but they have not done it yet. So that's going to be the next, what I call a bottleneck. But this bottleneck in New Iberia is going to really be something we're going to be a little bit concerned with. We've got DOTD, our counterparts, Press Marshal in Iberia, State Police, they've all been in contact that we're going to have more police officers to direct people around those areas if we can. At the end of the day, I think you're better off just sitting in traffic and going one lane. At least it's going to move. Because one of the alternative routes, well, this is what it looks like right now. That's where it is, which is basically from Jefferson Terrace to Center Street, Highway 14.
And it's horrible.
And it's horrible. One of the evacuation routes that they are asking us to at least let people know about is pretty much, I mean, it'll work to get off at Jefferson Terrace. The first interchange you come to will take you all the way through to Center Street. You come out by Lowe's, and then you can merge back. And you remember now, this is one lane. Highway 90 will be one lane. And when they get to Center Street, the one lane will be in the left lane. So if you're merging from Center Street onto Highway 90, you shouldn't have to worry about merging because there's going to be one lane each way and you'll be able to roll until you get to Lafayette, of course. So, but we're trying. I mean, there's really just not any options. And again, it's not necessarily Iberia, St. Mary folks. It's people to our east that's going to be rolling through here.
So David, excuse me.
Yeah.
Is it possible to coordinate that with the National Weather Service Center to make those mandatory evacuations to get our people out of the way first before those other folks start?
The problem is that you'll never get there like that because it's going to be in paths. It just depends on where the storm is projected to go. If it's projected to go like Ida did, they're gonna go. They're gonna get on top of us, and once they're on top of us, we're stuck. So,
is there any way you can put signage up, or is the levee still an evacuation route?
we took the levee road 3 weeks ago. They had holes back there 7 foot deep. But that's not the problem. The problem is there is no cell service from the time you leave the Sherrington locks until you get past Lake Forest Point. There's no, you can get cell coverage, you got to go up on top of the levee. You got to drive up on top of the levee to get cell coverage. So you really can't. Now I'm going to tell you, local people are still going to use it because we have people use the levee every year we have an evacuation, or if they just want to go travel. It is a pretty good ways to go. The problem with the levee road is you got to get on I-10 and you're going to wind up back at Lafayette anyway. Right. So I mean, I don't know if it's really doing us any good, but I certainly don't believe we can put people from St. Bernard, Plaquemine, Terrebonne, Lafourche, Assumption on that levee road. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that at all.
What are the issues with contraflow? Have both lanes going north?
Well, it just really, you can't do it now because it's only one lane of traffic. Contraflow is not.
The southbound lane turn it north.
Then you're dead on anybody coming the other way. There's nowhere to go. Yeah, Lou?
David, are we going to be painting the old bridge too? That's going to be another obstacle around.
Yeah, they claim they are. I don't know where they stand with it right now. And I think it's been let for bid, so it'll be coming up pretty soon. But it'll be a multi-year project. It won't be a one and done.
That's right.
So yeah, it's going to be some tricky stuff around this year. What you did? Uh-huh. All right, let's talk about shelters real quick. We don't plan on having any shelters at all. They're going to be some at last resort, something happens or whatever. But our shelter that we use for St. Mary Parish is in central Louisiana. And it's a lot involved in it, obviously, and if you happen to go feed that many people, it's pretty tough. But we'll use our school buses. We have contracts with our school employees to drive the buses. We are asking that, when is Brandon coming for the ETN chain training? June. Sometime in June, we'd like Mayor, y'all maybe to talk to us about trying to help signing the people up in the event we have a major evacuation. Now we use driver's licenses if you have an ID card, but you still have to go have someone log it all in, and we need help with that. So we'll be in touch with y'all here real quick because it's coming up pretty soon, and we'd like somebody to come in there and try to help us, and it'll be it might be some of your citizens anyway. So we're still going to pick up at the Morgan City Junior and the Franklin High School to get them, to log them in before we send them. We have to send them with a registration. If you've never seen a shelter, that's what they look like. I think it's cruel and unusual punishment that we put people through that, but you got to remember, it's a last resort. You've got no other options. And that's, I tell everybody, you got a cot, and you got another cot, and that's it. There's not a lot of privacy, and it's very, very stressful for the people that are in these shelters, I can tell you. So it wasn't quite that bad 2 years ago when we was helping Earl out, but it was still pretty lot.
Where's that one, David?
That was the Superdome. Now, in the post-storm, what we'd like to ask every municipality to do, or everybody really, is the damage.la.gov is an app that you can show that you've had damage. And the reason it's important to us is the parish has to meet a threshold of how much damage occurred. School boards, I know y'all gonna have damage in some of y'all places. We'd like for you to get with us on that because we have to meet a threshold in order to receive reimbursement. And what y'all spend and what the Mayor Berwick spends and the Mayor of Morgan City has to spend, in addition to what the parish has to spend, all goes into the same pot, so to speak, that we can get our threshold up high enough that we can get reimbursement, maybe from 75% to 90% reimbursement. Yeah, Bill?
What about drainage district?
Everybody, yes sir, everybody. Very important. So, and that's debris, and then building damage. If you had to open a shelter and you spend some money, I mean, it's almost anything you do. Yeah.
So, considering that, my question is there some method besides this meeting where we're communicating with all of those sub-entities within the parish portfolio so that people know what to track, when to start that process, so that that documentation flows easily? Great question, because last year the legislature passed, Darren, this is the public official elected official workshop, yeah, where everybody has to attend. Is that right? Did it pass? It's happening right now?
It happens online.
It happens online, yeah.
Classes online.
And then, like, you know, for the city or somebody, we'll be glad to come out for the city or the school board and explain that maybe in a little bit more detail, Patterson, wherever, to make sure they understand that, because we don't always get it. Yeah, I think our issue in the past has been underreporting, right? Because people are not familiar. Well, once we hit the threshold, we good, but we got to hit the threshold. You know, like for Barry, I argue with them every year. Barry wasn't a hurricane. All of the things we checked, we never saw a sustained wind over 75 miles an hour. But it was a hurricane. Okay, we all, kind of understand that. But when those smaller events occur, it's hard to get your damage assessments up high enough to where you can get your reimbursement back. And that's what the goal is for that, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yo.
Just quickly right here too. Traffic public assessment, but damage assessment is critical too to get IA, data and narrative, but to get individual assistance for the people that are affected. So that's what
That's right.
Yeah, once you hit that, that's correct. And then, we'll be putting that out, obviously, once we get there, that the IA, which is individual assistance, and then there's PA for public assistance for the municipalities and the parish and school boards and whatever. But the drainage districts and sewer districts, they're all covered already. So that all goes in the same pot. Yeah, we went through all the cell phones and all of that. Didn't work last year for Ida. But certainly we look forward to the days when either the mayor can call and say, all right, y'all can come back to Morgan City. And I say you can. We're just trying to get input from as many of the local elected officials as we can. The main thing is to make sure when they come back, they're going to have a good shot at getting their utility services back up and running, water, the basic commodities. Or in the case of Ida a few years ago, our gas stations were overworked, obviously, for a long time, but it works out. It was very, very stressful for everybody, but I think we did the best job we could. And of course, drinking water. Now, for the municipalities and the school boards and the water and drainage districts, if y'all have a need for some equipment, it's set up to where y'all have to go through us to make the request up to GoSep. It's called WebEOC. What we do is we bring in somebody every year. They sit in the office, they sit in front of the computer, and we go in there and say, we need a water pump, an 8-inch water pump at 123 Main Street, whatever, and they order it, and we get it brought in. That's for the police officers as well. And then as time goes on, we'll start getting supplies in. We may not get them right away, but we have a 12,000 square foot National Guard armory that is going to get remodeled hopefully this year to where we can do a little bit better job of holding on to some of our supplies, MREs, water. We got a little bit of everything in there. So if you need something, call us. If we don't have it, we'll try to get it for you. But certainly any major request, you need to go through us. Which is why we'd like we ought to stay in touch with us during an event, especially if you got affected, like the last couple of storms, maybe Franklin gets hit worse than Morgan City or vice versa. Well, then we can shift down here and basically be close by to cover whatever we need. There's a couple of pictures of some of the shelf clouds, huh? Shelf clouds. I fudged, I looked it up.
That was in Mississippi. That's another one in Mississippi from the other side. We got this is the makings of the one that hit New Iberia a couple years ago. And actually, we actually have a picture of the actual tornado. That was taken at the airport right before it hit. Maybe on the other side you can start seeing it, but that was the one that went through up Jefferson Terrace and out the other end. Like Tom was saying about all the flights and stuff, we have a Civil Air Patrol here. Paul Rappermont is one of the pilots, and they do a lot of flying for GOSEP for riverine flooding and post-storm flooding. So we do have that if you need it. You know, with the advent of all the drones, I know some of y'all have drones. I would do drone pictures of every facility you have before and after, just to be able to document what you got. The drones are the easiest way to go, obviously. So if you have access to that. Now, we're not in El Nino yet. When this first started up, it was supposed to be May through July. It was going to form. And I kind of like the idea that this year we're going to get an El Nino event that occurs. But what basically all it does is, instead of the easterlies, there's a chance that it'll be knocked down, or maybe actually turn around and go to westerlies, which would really help deter some of the growth of some of the storms. Now, the problem with all of that, these are the last El Nino years that I found. 2005, Katrina Rita, that's pretty cool, yeah. Laura Delta and Zeta that year. 17 was Hurricane Harvey, 60 inches of rain. What are we going to do if we have 60 inches of rain in St. Mary Parish? The levee systems are great to keep all the water out, but once you get rain on the inside, I don't know what we do. And of course, he said it before. Audrey caused all of those deaths in Cameron Parish in 57, Betsy in 65, but Hilda was a La Nina year that came right through St. Mary Parish. So I look at it this way. I think we got a chance that it's going to be a slower year this year, but if you get one, it's going to be bad. And of course, as we all know, it don't take but one to ruin your day. Look, Hurricane Andrew was an August storm. That was an A-named storm in August. So it could still happen. And I'll just say that stay in touch with us. If you have any questions, if you have an organization, you know, Mayor, you want something just for your city, we'll come do that. We'll come get with your public works crew and everything. Have no problem doing that for anybody, really, even the school board. We stay in touch with them fairly regular. So, and that's really all we have today. Sorry about the broken voice, but anybody got any other questions real quick?
David, I got a
Yeah.
question. We had a shelter in Berwick, and we had some issues with people with COVID that was in there. And they got there, and people in the shelter didn't want to be there because of COVID.
Duval, speak up a little louder so people can hear you in the back.
The microphone. Don't hit the button. Tori will jump on you.
Okay. We had an issue in our shelter in Berwick with some people with COVID. And when they showed up, it caused quite a problem at that shelter. Is there any chance that we can possibly set up a shelter just for people with special medical issues? I know they're not going to take them at the medical shelter with COVID. That's not enough of an emergency. But is there some place that we might be able to move these people to where it doesn't cause all the eruption that it caused us last time?
Yeah, and by the way, when Earl called us to open up those shelters, guess who the first guy was that stepped up? It was a little bit of an issue, but the COVID threat is all over now. There is a place for them to go, but they have to be triaged, I guess, first, and that's what caused our problem before. Is we just had too much too quick dumped on us. That was Earl's fault, though. We love you, Earl. You know that. But yeah, they do have a place for those special needs people, and I think Lake Forest Point was one of them, wasn't it, Jimmy? I think Lake Forest Point and the one in Chico State Park, that was the other one. Yeah. Anything else? All right, we're gonna move right along. Mike, I'm gonna do one thing ahead of you, but you can start coming up. After Mike was scheduled to be the Corps of Engineers, I have a letter from Mr. Vic Landry. He wanted me to read in, and he wants everybody to know that we defer to the United States Coast Guard for channel closures, and we will have channel condition surveys performed as soon as after the storm passes, as early as possible, safety permitting. We will host our navigation restoration conference call prior to and following the storm's landfall to share all details of channel conditions in addition to the U.S. Coast Guard's port coordination conference call. But he couldn't come today. They had another meeting scheduled. So, Mr. Mike, your turn. Don't touch the button.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes. Right side.
Sure this is still on. I'm going to go real quick. This is our district base map. One thing that I am happy to report this year is we actually have continuous levee coverage from Wax Lake Outlet north of the Intercoastal all the way to Sherrington Canal. We completed that loop summer of last year. We have the Bayou Test structure, and we have the Yoakley structure. Our biggest area of concern now is everything south of 90 and west of the Sherrington Canal. We're currently in the process of doing a hydrological study to see where we're going to go with those projects. Those lines that are currently on there are some proposed levee segments. The biggest thing is tying into Iberia Parish.
Where's the parish line on that map?
I think it's that white line right there. There you go. Just real quick, a couple of our newer structures and our older as well. This is a Bayou Test structure, which keeps water from Sherrington Canal coming into the east side of the Bayou Test. We had to use this during, I think it was either Laura or Delta. It was in construction. We cut it off with sheet pile just to get us through the storm. And then we did close it 2 years ago for Ida. Wasn't necessary, but one of our mottos is we'd rather be damned that we did than damned that we didn't. So, depending on where we know the storm's going, for instance, this structure, there is no pump station to pump the water out of Bayou Teche, but we do know, we've run models, that there's plenty of storage there. We also know what the lowest houses are in that segment, so those are the ones we're going to be concerned about first. Next one, this is a big one, the Yoakley extension. This is over on Industrial Road in Franklin. Right there, you can see that is Metal Shark. You can see Sherrington Canal kind of runs left to right. Wow. This was Hurricane Delta, I believe. But it overflows its banks during a good storm surge push, and was flooding out there as well as Gocraft. Well, last year we finished up a project, and it's a removable flood wall and levee. So within both of these shipyards, basically cutting right through the middle of their docks, we had these removable flood walls installed. I don't know how this. Let me see if this works. Yeah, there it goes. This is a time lapse of it being installed. The levee district has hired a contractor that'll go in a couple days before. Whenever we get into, we're in a watch period. We're going to go out, we're going to assemble some of the stuff, leave it open so they can continue business, and then the day before the storm, we'll go in and finish closing it off. Really cool system came from Germany. They can continue their operations on a normal day. With this, you can see the concrete base. This is the only thing that's visible there on a daily basis.
Is that 8 feet?
That is to an elevation of 10.5. It's roughly about 8 feet tall with a 2.5-foot ground elevation.
Do you need any decoration to go ahead and install? I mean, like...
No. Typically, so just kind of going off of what David said, when we get into a situation, and I'm speaking for the levee district, when we get into a situation where we know we may be doing flood fight activities, there's things that we're going to have to spend money on, the levee district will go and have a special meeting and declare a state of emergency. That gives us the authority to spend the emergency money to do whatever flood fighting activities and things like that we need. Pulling the trigger on this contractor is one of those things. So this is a really cool system. There's a total of about, I think it's 800 or 900 feet of this removable flood wall. Can literally be done in a day. Super easy, super quick. I believe this week the contractor was going out, just kind of check all the supplies, check all the bolts, things like that. So that one's ready. Bayou Tesh was tested last week. Everything's operational. Bayou Shane, which we'll talk about in a minute, is going to be tested next week. Some of our other stuff, Franklin Canal. This is operated by the city of Franklin and their fire department. So they take care of the closure on this and running the pump station. This structure is going on 10 years old this year. So we've been doing maintenance, things like that. We'll do a maintenance closure here coming up pretty soon on that structure. That's another picture of it. And now it has actually 4 pumps installed. This is an older picture, so the other 2 pumps aren't there.
It's actually 4.
Hanson Canal, which is operated by the parish. But we're fortunate. Before, we used to have to bring in a little standby generator to hook it up to just press a button and close it. It took longer to get the generator out there than it did to actually close it. They now have a standby generator on the pump station adjacent to this that they hook the power up to it, so now it's easy. It literally takes 10 minutes. The Yellow Bayou closure and pump station also operated by the parish over on Yellow Bayou on Alice Road. This prevents water from getting into the Centerville area around the school board office. What's happening? And then, of course, all the Morgan City backwater stuff. The only locations currently that we have, I'll call them gaps, would be the lakefront and lakeside, and then the discharge canal along LA 70. They are hopefully going to be finished with that pump station on the lakefront here in the next couple of months, which will wrap up that portion of the project. And then this is more or less just kind of a blown up, zoomed in of the district map. In the past, probably 5 years, we've had a number of overtoppings on the Bayou Sally levees. Typically, those are some of the first people that are evacuated from the area. Again, we have, I'm going to call it 9 feet as being the lowest levee in this, Centerville, Franklin area. We did lift Yoakley to 10.5. Our goal is to get everything on that south side to 10.5. The good thing about it, even if these levees are overtopped, which they never have been, there's still a good bit of area that can be filled in with that water. You also have the pump stations for each of those different basins. So while it's a threat, it's not a tremendous threat. The Corps came in a couple of years ago and closed another problem area, which was the gap over by Cabot. So that area is taken care of. At this point, there is very little, besides closing structures, of flood fighting. And when I say flood fighting, I mean sandbags, HESCOs, things like that. There's very little of that we need to do with the storm up and coming. This is the Berwick, Bayou Vista, Patterson area. Again, very well protected. The city of Berwick takes care of the floodgates on the riverfront. There's no other closures besides the locks and the East Calumet floodgate, but those are closed as well. We have lifted anything in this vicinity to a 12.5-foot mark. So it's a very well protected area as well. Your flood insurance doesn't think so, but we can. And then, of course, you got the Morgan City area. Again, the city of Morgan City takes care of the floodgates here, as well as the Walnut Street Canal floodgate. Area is very well protected as well. The one thing I don't have on here is Bayou Chene. Bayou Chene is not a storm surge floodgate. It is a riverine floodgate. But as experienced during Hurricane Barry, we had a storm I'll call it to the west of the river, and we had in a temporary emergency structure at Bayou Chene, and it worked well. The biggest thing that we have to pay attention to is where is it gonna make landfall? If it makes landfall to the east of Bayou Chene, it's not good to have it closed, so we'd rather have it open in that instance. So that's one thing that we'll be monitoring. Bayou Teche is typically going to be closed 3 or 4 days before any storm, just because we need to get all of the any rainwater that's in there, we need to have it out. So when the gate is closed, it has the ability of letting water out. I know in Terrebonne for Ida, they had a bunch of damaged barge structures. Their situation is a good bit different. Theirs is a closed system. I think the Bubba Dub did not have flow-through gates. Am I correct?
Yeah, but that had broken loose.
Yeah, so what happened there, you probably saw in the news stories, they had more water on the inside than they did on the outside. Those barges are designed to do the opposite. So whenever you put that water inside and it's pushing it out, what it basically did was ripped it away from the structure. We don't have any structures in our district that can happen to, because there's always an outlet. For instance, Bayou Chene. If you get, the water can go east, there's other places it can go. It's not going to force that structure open. As well, we have flow-through gates there. Bayou Teche, same thing. If the water on the inside gets higher than the water on the outside, the gates open up and it lets the water out. One of the things just to keep in mind, we have been living the FEMA dream for, I've been around 10 years. 10 years. We thought we had it all pinned down. We knew how to operate the system. It doesn't matter. It changes every time. All I can tell you is document every possible thing you can, because they're going to ask you questions that make absolutely no sense. And you have to be able to answer them, or they're going to say, well, we're not paying you for that. In fact, we just got one from Laura saying, this is Hurricane Laura. That was what, 2 years ago? 3 years ago? 3 years ago. We still haven't closed out those PWs because they are asking silly questions that make absolutely no sense. So make sure you got all of your information ready to go. And even when you think you got it made, they're still going to ask questions. Any questions? Thank y'all.
All right.
Captain Russell with the Coast Guard.
Captain Russell with the Coast Guard. You have any slides, sir? Light screen.
Okay, good morning. Commander Ben Russell, Commanding Officer of the Coast Guard of Morgan City. So, I just foot stomped the flexibility the Coast Guard, your Coast Guard has in this town. So today there are between 4 units, 100 Coast Guard Sentinels on duty here. And they're presently directing traffic of vessels. They're managing pollution. They're inspecting vessels. But that flexibility changes when we have a contingency plan and we have to support the emergency support functions. And so Ida, we grew to about a force of 250 within 5 days. And so there's a flexibility there that we can push out to the field. The capabilities are unique to supporting the civil authorities. And so I think we integrate well. There's a plan of dedicated professionals here that are absolutely trained in contingency management. They do their job very, very well in that sense. Thank you to our landlord. We stay here. We don't necessarily evacuate. However, those sentinels that do evacuate eventually can get pulsed back in, and for any of our mission sets that are necessary to recover the area. I think Ida was a great test bed for us. The damage was, of course, far to the, well, not far, but to the east of us, and that's where we were able to go. We lived here, thank you to some very generous neighbors of Morgan City that put us up. So we can come as long as we can have a place to lay our heads for a few weeks. But that's really kind of it. So we're here, we're flexible to support, and we can really do many, many things with these capabilities and authorities. Any questions for the Coast Guard? Thank you.
Where's Garrett? Who's next?
There he is.
Garrett.
You can put it in here and take a minute. I don't want to be accused of turning it off.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. All right. As far as the sheriff's office goes, we're prepared and ready for another hurricane season. Some of the things that we do, we patrol as normal until a hurricane hits. At that time, we'll pull our deputies off the streets, depending on the strength of the winds. Really what we do is afterwards. Afterwards, we have equipment to help clear off the roadways, because if there's an emergency, if we can't get to people, we can't help them. We also have equipment such as high water vehicles, boats for rescues, things of that nature. We also have contact with LSA, which is Louisiana Sheriff's Association, that can provide assistance as far as other equipment and manpower. We also have our webpage that we also put out as much information and share as much information as we can of what's going on. And we also provide a lot of photos to Homeland Security as far as damages and stuff like that, since we're out there and we see it firsthand. The biggest thing I would say is please heed the warnings and be prepared. So any questions, anything?
Sir, do you have any credentialing or anything to try to control people coming in and out?
What it normally is, Homeland Security will issue some badges to come in.
No, you can't have one.
Yeah, well, it seems like they don't like you, so I don't think you're going to be welcome back.
Well, I was hoping to get around to David.
You're in trouble.
Straight to Cindy for that.
You're in trouble. But no, we just do our best to help secure the areas.
We do. That's it.
That's it. That's easy.
I tell you, this is quite a group we have here today. We've been doing this for years. Last year, when Ida hit our next door neighbor and everything, everybody comes together. So this is a tremendous practice drill going forward. Hopefully we don't have to use the building this year like we had for the last several years, but if it has to, it's a good place and everybody works together. But just in closing, between St. Mary Parish, Port of Morgan City, and all the different agencies here together today, thank everybody for coming out, and thank everybody for working together. This is, I mean, the municipalities, it's the parish, the different agencies, the different state agencies, the different federal agencies represented. Pretty good turnout. This is not bad, and this is very good for the area. So if something does happen, I know we're in good hands. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. Thank y'all very much. Good luck this hurricane season.
I have one other thing. I want to thank Brady for coming.
Oh, great for being on the website.
Reporting today, so that will be available on KQKI's Facebook page for anyone to go back.
Facebook and YouTube channel as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Brady.
And Cindy, I think David said they're going to put it on.
They will put it on the
Y'all put it on.
website.
Good, great.
And that's on KQKI, Facebook, and YouTube.
Thanks, Brady.
You got it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Thank y'all.